release planning and the role of a Scrum Master in release planning, which is going to be our open up questions, right? That's a question from me. When we talk about release planning, it's more or less what we are going to call on. I always like to take stuff out of the Scrum environment, and then we can explain from that aspect, and then we zoom it back into the Scrum environment. I think that is an approach that helps us to kind of get it much better and more clearer. Now let's assume that um, you you are a teller, right? And you take a contract for a university to produce a number of costumes to them, right? Let's say 50,000. Now, will you deliver all of those costumes in one day? Like, except you're a very big industry. Most often, you will plan to have a schedule on how to release those costumes, right? And maybe it's a 5 years contract with them. And each year you plan to deliver, let's say 4,000, 4,000, 4,000. Now, is what you're releasing to them at one time is how you kind of plan in your capacity. And your ability to release what you promise is based on if you have that capacity, right? So when we talk about release planning, we talk about what capacity, what are we going to release based on our capacity. So from the planning, release plan come after we have a product roadmap. So a product roadmap definitely give us an idea of the different features and the milestone we need to achieve. When we have the futures and the milestone, we now break it down based on our capacity, based on how many developers or how many team members you have and the ability to do the work. So because of that, we can now plan because we have 7 people in our team, and these 7 people can do this work at this period. And given the amount of work we have, we'll be able to complete X by this period, X by this period, X by this period, X by this period. If I use another example to kind of give you an idea of when we talk about release planning, let's take, for instance, we're building a 7-story building. Now, when you take a contract with the customer, you plan to say, okay, we're going to finish the foundation by this period. We're going to finish the decking by this period. We're building all the plumbing work by this period. So they can evaluate. The reason you're able to give them that timeline is because you understand the capacity or the number of workers you have. So based on that, we can establish our release planning. Now, what is the role of a Scrum Master in release planning, or what should the Scrum Master be doing in terms of release planning? First, if you don't have an agile coach in your company, then you'll be the one to facilitate the release planning. But the release planning should be facilitated in relation to the tech lead, the agile coach, and the product manager and the PO, because they understand this technicality. If you don't have an agile coach, then you might replace the agile coach. Now, if you are in a safe environment, then there is somebody called the release train engineer who coordinate all the releases, because a release in a safe environment is more of a system than multiple teams. So you, the Scrum Master, you can only kind of tack what your team need to do in terms of the PI objective. That's what you're focusing on. But in terms of the releases, it's going to be the release train engineer coordinating that with the product management, with the system architect, and all of that. When it comes to the level of the team, now when stories or futures attack into releases, what exactly does that mean? Let's say that we plan to release a future. Let's say we're working on a banking app, and we want to make sure that we have a future on the app that can help students to be able to start paying their student loan, and we want to make that available to them before the start of 2023. Then there are certain activities that need to be done before that story is released out for students to start working on, right? So we need to make sure that as Scrum Master, we need to make sure that we look at all the different stories that need to be part of that release and follow up closely that we will be able to complete it. You can go on create a release panel which is on your board, and you can stack all of this story into this release panel, so that on one click on your release panel you can be able to see what is left and what need to be done. And the day of the release, you definitely just follow up with your team and look at what has been completed, what pulled back from the system. And just to clarify, release doesn't take place on your Scrum board or on your Jira board, Rally board, or so. Now, the Rally board, the Jira board, the Azure DevOps board, they're only two for you to track to see what is going on. The actual work is going up in an environment we call a staging environment. So, in that case, you are only looking using that as a checklist. I always say for instance, you want to go to the shop. What are you going to have? A checklist. When you do something, you check. But are you putting those items on that checklist? No, the items are going in the cart. So what is happening when you are facilitating events using your board, using the Jira, Ravi, is that those are like the to-do list. When a developer say have completed, it means they actually bought the item, they put it in their basket. Now, for some reason, you, the Scrum Master, might not have the technicality to have access to the basket. The product owner most often have access to the staging environment. Right. So when we clarify that, we understand what release planning is all about and what is your role as a Scrum Master in release planning.